Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. I am your host, Baron Imperius. And today, for our little construction project, we will be looking at the Old Bonegrinder Windmill from the Curse of Strahd module. Originally published in 2016 for 5th edition, its popularity has caused it to be featured as the setting for many a D&D glory and horror story. I personally DM'd a campaign that lasted over a year, but alas, it was slain by the stalwart foe of many a tabletop group. Scheduling conflicts. Fortunately for us, the module does provide a description, artwork, and a layout, which I will be using as my primary inspiration for this build. The description reads as follows. The onion-domed edifice leans forward and to one side, as though trying to turn away from the stormy gray sky. You see gray brick walls and dirt-covered windows on the upper floors. A decrepit wooden platform encircles the windmill above a flimsy doorway, leading to the building's interior. Perched on a wooden beam above the door is a raven. It hops about and squawks at you, seemingly agitated. The initial plan for this project was to construct the entire thing out of sheet foam that you can get easily at the dollar store. It comes in this protected sheet. Mine, as you can see here, got a little water damaged at one point. So you can just remove that and continue with your project as I did here. With the paper sheet removed, I start to measure out what will be the dimensions for the circular base of the tower. The initial plan was to make a long foam strip and then to perforate it at different points so that I could curl it in on itself. However, that plan did not work out in the end, mostly because I pressed a little too hard and the foam snapped, which I could have spent a lot of time trying to repair and reinforce the inside, but in the end decided to just pivot. So after sorting through my collection of cardboard tubes, I did find that an oatmeal container had roughly the correct dimensions that I needed for the base of the windmill. I then measured it out to the height that I needed, and then made the cut. When I finished making the cut, I then had to make sure that the base was level and that there were no burrs along the incision. I even used an emery board to try to make sure there were no burrs that could affect how level it was. Once I was satisfied with how level it was, I then went through the process of picking out from my assorted cardboard cylinders which one would best serve as the main structure for the tower of the windmill. And I was very happy that I decided to keep the bottom of the oatmeal container as part of the base. That way, all I had to do was simply make a small circular incision and check that the tube fits nice and snug. Originally, the cardboard tube was going to go all the way up to the base of Area 4, the onion-shaped dome. However, I realized that its width was wrong to go all the way up to the roof, so I had to cut it down to the top of Area 2. And then we cut it to our desired height. And now we can begin measuring and cutting out the pieces of foam that will help us construct the sloping sides on Area 2 that sort of form a rough cone shape. For the sloping panels for Area 2, I was cutting the foam into these rough trapezoid shapes, the idea being that once they were all laid together, they would form a rough cone shape that could be sanded down around the edges to make it appear more rounded. With the foam pieces cut, now is time to secure the two base parts together. In order to do that, I glue some paper around the tower. That way that the base of the tower is even more snug, set within the wider base for the windmill. Also, if all else fails, use excessive amounts of Mod Podge. Like, just slather it in Mod Podge like it's butter in a southern recipe. And now we can begin attaching our little trapezoid pieces to form the sloping wall at the base of the windmill. And once that's completed, it should look something like this. Buster break, buster break. Gotta take a pause for a buster break. Yeah.
Father, what are you building?
Building stuff.
Can you build me sausage?
No, I'm not building you sausage. Now we measure and cut out the little pieces of foam that will serve as the windows on the windmill. So after cutting out their rough dimensions, we then roughly cut off the corners of the tops and use an emery board to smooth out to make the desired arch. Once the window is to our liking, with a quick comparison between the slope of the wall where we would like to attach the window, cut an angle into the base of the window to try to get it as flush as possible. Next, we make a small perforation where we want to attach it, and then use a piece of toothpick as well as plenty of Mod Podge to secure the window into the sloping side. Once all the windows are attached, it's time to apply some lightweight spackling to fill in all of the gaps between the sheet foam. You want to be as generous as possible with your spackling. Just really push it into all of the little gaps and just build up layer upon layer till you get a nice thick coat. Once you're satisfied with your coverage, then you just set aside for about 24 hours to let the spackling cure. Of course, time may vary between brands.
Some time later.
After giving the spackling some time to cure, we can now take an emery board or some sandpaper and begin sanding down some of the rougher patches. We don't want a completely smooth wall, just one that's smooth enough that it's believable for a medieval rustic setting. A technique that I would later come across while working on this project was one where, after applying the spackling and waiting for it to begin to cure, after about 15 to 30 minutes, was that if I would go along and gently tap on the wet spackling, it would help smooth out a lot of the bumps from the initial laying down, giving it an overall smoother finish and reducing the amount of time necessary to sand down any visible rough patches. For the next phase of our construction project, we now look to construct the neck of the windmill, or Area 3. To construct this portion of the windmill, I will cut 2 cardboard discs that match the diameters of the base and top of Area 3's tower. I will then cut a dowel, in this case one of my fallen paintbrushes, to the desired height. Glue the 3 together, and once that sets, it'll form the base to build the towering neck of the windmill.
Sometime even later.
Once the glue has dried, I use coffee stir sticks, the flat wooden ones, that I have already cut to the appropriate length to form a sort of scaffolding for the wall of the tower. As the glue dries for Area 3, I add on some wooden supports to the window niches in Area 2. Next, I add the window niches for Area 3. They protrude from the wall a bit more than in the artwork, but that is a sacrifice I am willing to make. While those windows set, I add some of that wonderful spackling to fill the gap in the window niches. I was concerned that simply applying spackling over the wood of Area 3's wall may result in most of it being squished through like Play-Doh. To prevent that, I went with a route similar to paper mache. I cut up a napkin into strips and used watered-down Mod Podge to adhere the strips over the wooden coffee stirrers. I went with a few layers of very thin paper, but a single layer of paper towel might work just as well. Once the improvised paper mache is dry, I can apply spackling. This will help hide the wooden stir sticks and provide a relatively smooth but rustic plaster look to the windmill. Remember, we're not going for perfectly smooth, but smooth enough for a medieval setting. Now for Area 4, the Onion Dome. This build is going to be similar to the neck of the windmill, but broken up into 3 parts: the base, the middle, and the top. Once completed, each part will help form the baseline structure for the Onion Dome. Are there easier ways to do this? Probably, but I didn't know them at the time. We'll start by building the supports for the top and bottom of the dome. First, I cut out 4 circles, 2 large, 2 small. Each corresponds to the widest and narrowest parts of the dome, respectively. Now we cut more dowels to our desired heights for the top and base. We glue a narrow with a wide using the dowel as a spacer, being sure not to mix up top parts with bottom parts. We then begin to cut more stir sticks to serve as wall supports for both portions. Upon completing the top portion of the dome, I added another dowel portion to get some additional height. I then used stir sticks to provide support for the future walls of the dome. Once the top and bottom portions of the dome are completed, if you put them together, they look like a Da Vinci UFO. Now for the middle portion of the dome. This is also where the shaft for the windmill sails comes out, so that has to be considered. I have seen some terrain builders and miniature enthusiasts build working windmills, with the shaft connecting with a motor, allowing the sails to spin. Now, that's very impressive, but not what I'm going for. Another consideration is that you have to make sure that the shaft is long enough so that the sails of the windmill won't hit any other part of the structure, including parts that you may not have added on just yet. The shaft will be cut from a nice round chopstick I saved from a takeaway and glued firmly in place on top of the base portion of the dome. I sandwiched it in with some toothpicks to secure it in place with plenty of Mod Podge. For the wall of the middle portion, I reused the original idea for how to build the base of the windmill, using a curled piece of foam. Again, I had to use a lot of Mod Podge, and I had to hold it in place for quite some time before the glue set. Once the walls for the middle portion of the dome are set, I can begin to assemble all the parts completed so far for the windmill. Do some checks to see how level all the parts will be, making adjustments as necessary. In the description, the Old Bonegrinder is stated to be leaning, so any imperfections are happy accidents that make the build more authentic. But we will have to pick this up another day. This project was a real labor of love for me and took a couple of weeks to finish, so there is still a lot more to cover. I have been building miniatures since I was a kid, but building for tabletop has only been in the past few years. I have shared my creations with family and friends, but now I hope to share my creativity to a wider audience and maybe inspire others to build their own fantasies. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe if you want to see future projects. It is still early days, but I hope to get a consistent schedule going. I have been your host, Baron Imperius. Thank you for watching, and until next time, build your fantasy.